Hey everybody, Gary Edelman, American Battlefield Trust. Here we are, Gettysburg 161. I'm only at a 15 out of 10 now in enthusiasm because I was a 17, but then we're having some connectivity trouble, so we're shooting these a different way. Welcome, welcome. We hope you share this video with your friends, and we hope you have a meaningful Gettysburg anniversary, even as you might be interested in the Atlanta campaign, the Vicksburg campaign, the Tullahoma campaign, the 7 days battles that are all happening around this late June into July period. So however you engage, we hope you enjoy. And we are on the Gettysburg battlefield. It's the first day, so we're appropriately here on McPherson's Ridge. That's the McPherson barn behind me. The ridge bears the name of the McPherson family who lived here. And our goal this year is to show you as much of the battlefield as we can, hopefully live if we're able to get the good connectivity. But as I look around here, I'm looking over toward the scene of the Confederate attack on July 1st, 1863. Here come the Confederates. The Union cavalry has fallen back, and a couple of brigades of Union soldiers come up. Let me just turn it right on over here to Tim Smith, official Adams County historian and historian at the Adams County Historical Society. Tim?
Hello, everybody. So, first I got to say that I don't know of a more pleasant July 1st in temperature that I spent on the battlefield. It's just a perfect day out to walk the battlefield. And of course, we're on one of the most iconic places associated with the first day's battle, McPherson's Ridge. And yes, this was the farm owned by Edward McPherson at the time of the Civil War. Oddly enough, the McPhersons never lived here. It was a tenant farm, and it was a few hundred acres, and it encompassed the area all the way from north of the unfinished railroad cut down to the woods over here, which some people refer to as McPherson's Woods, although they were owned by the Herbst family. One interesting thing about this area, it saw heavy fighting on July 1st as the Iron Brigade fought against Archer's Brigade in the area in front of us here. And in the afternoon action, there was extremely heavy fighting along this ridge. We're walking the area of Stone's Brigade, where Brockenbrough and Pettigrew hit this area. And just fascinating. I've always been interested in the first day of the battle. And the first day of the battle, you might know, is actually bloodier than the third day of the battle. And I like to say, percentage-wise, for the amount of men involved and amount of casualties, it is one of the bloodiest days of the American Civil War.
In fact, you could say it would be the fifth bloodiest day of the Civil War by my count.
Itself.
17,000 casualties, and that is just among only 50,000 combatants. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, and when you drive along this area today, most people are driving, just coming onto the field on the auto tour route, and the first day of the battle is the morning of the first day is the point of discussion. But this actually, the afternoon action that took place here is a little heavier than the morning action as for amount of casualties. And it just astounds me, all the different things that happened here.
Yeah, and you're talking about a lot more people here in the afternoon. Instead of just a couple of brigades fighting each other on each side of the road, we're talking about multiple brigades and divisions arriving. Now, let's pause for a second here as we look around. You're looking toward Reynolds or Herbst or McPherson's Woods. As you go over, Tim, past this snake rail or Virginia worm fence, you're going to be seeing Seminary Ridge off in the distance, not Cemetery Ridge, Seminary Ridge. And as you continue, Seminary Ridge becomes Oak Ridge. That is the trees in the distance. And then if you continue onward from there, the hill in the distance is Oak Hill. So Oak Hill, Oak Ridge, Seminary Ridge, and then it's going to continue on to a different name as well.
And I think it's important to know that this area was well recorded, the appearance of it, by Matthew Brady and his crew when they arrived on the battlefield, a week or so after the battle. And there's some really interesting images of this woodlot taken from the pond at the McPherson farm that we just left. And there's a view looking across the McPherson barn towards the Oak Ridge and Oak Hill area. And these photographs are just valuable in our efforts to restore the battlefield to its Civil War appearance.
This is
It
great.
just fascinates
You
me.
don't even see, you can't see what we're doing. We're walking around, we're shooting a video, and Chris is scrolling through pictures to try to pull up the images that we just happened to mention. So well done, Chris White behind the camera there. And then what we're going to do is bring on some new guests, but let's give it a quick second here, because before we pass mics over, I want Tim to introduce who we're about to see right here. You got 1 minute. Who are we about to see here?
So this is John Burns. And of course, you know, he's more associated with the afternoon action of the first day. He was a citizen from the town of Gettysburg. He was 69 years old. He came out here onto the battlefield. He offered his services to the 150th Pennsylvania. He joined in the firing line. They actually ended up sending him to the 7th Wisconsin. He fought in the battle in the afternoon with the Iron Brigade. He was wounded during the fighting. He was captured, left on the battlefield for dead. He actually crawled back towards the town and then was later taken to his home. He survived the battle. He survived the war. After the battle, reporters talked to him when it was known that he had actually come out and fought in the battle. He gained some national notoriety. Matthew Brady learned of his story, took his photograph in front of his house. When Abraham Lincoln came to give the famous Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln wanted to meet John Burns, and he became somewhat of a national figure. N.C. Wyeth wrote a poem about, or N.C. Wyeth did
Oh
a
man,
poem
I was
of
afraid
him.
about this. Tim's going off on John Burns here. I said 1 minute. Wrap this up, man. Come on.
Bret Hart did a poem on him, and he became sort of symbolic as the civilian warrior during the Civil War. And the statue was placed here in 1903, and I should just mention that it's made to represent the Minuteman at Concord Bridge.
Good, good. Yeah, Tim is literally waxing poetic about his favorite Civil War civilian of all time. Now, he's passed the mic over. We now have more guests. We're going crazy here. We've got Dane and we've got Mike from the National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg. Come on, guys. They're going to be joining us on and off throughout our feed. And just let's go get into it. What do you got,
Okay,
Dane?
so we have a couple artifacts related to John Burns, some carte de visite photographs photographed by various Gettysburg area photographers, Tipton and Tyson photographers, and as well as some signatures on the bottom of that. We have a real brief letter written November 7th, 1864, by Burns to a Mr. C.L. Parslev, and it says, "Dear Sir, in doing what little I could at the battles of Gettysburg for my country, I did not expect so grateful a recognition of my humble services by the loyal men of the Republic. Accept my thanks for your kind estimate of the motives which prompted my taking up arms, and believe me to be, very respectfully yours, John L. Burns."
Now, before we leave you behind, this is super cool stuff. Why is it that, why is it important to see the stuff? Like, we can tell the stories, we can come to the battlefield, we know the accounts of the soldiers. What do you get from seeing photos and seeing the actual letter he wrote?
Well, the photos can be used to interpret the individual at various stages of their lives, but you can also use the documents to fill in gaps in the story, the lacuna history or the holes in history that we're always trying to seek and find more information about.
Good. Yeah, and sometimes when we're on, I don't even know everything you brought, but I suspect we're going to see things soldiers wore and other things like that. And I think it just brings you closer to the person. Maybe these people aren't abstractions from the past. Maybe they're more whole at that point.
Oh, most definitely. And there's no greater feeling than feeling some kind of connection to the person, and whether it's an ancestor of yours or whether it's someone who is not connected to your family in any way, but made some major contributions to the historical accounts as well.
Good, good. Well, maybe we'll be seeing you, I think, really soon again. So let me grab your mic. Thanks a lot. National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg. You should visit. Look for our video series coming up on that. Also, look for our Atlanta 160 series. Look for our Overland Campaign 160 series. Look for our Vicksburg series that we shot last year, if you're looking for other things. And of course, look for the last 7 years of Gettysburg Anniversary series that we have been shooting. Now, we are heading toward the Reynolds Woods, McPherson's Woods, Herbst Woods, and we're getting onto the line of probably the most famous Union brigade at Gettysburg. Tim, who is that?
That would be the 1st Brigade of the 1st Division of the 1st Army Corps, the Iron Brigade. And of course, they had solidified that nickname and won a reputation for being one of the best fighting units in the Army of the Potomac prior to Gettysburg. Now, they were actually joined after they got their nickname by the 24th Michigan. And you know, I find that sometimes you know, people don't want to give the 24th Michigan the credit of being one of the Iron Brigade units. But as
they
we'll
came a little
talk
later,
about,
right?
yeah, because they came later. But as we'll talk about, they had the heaviest loss of any Northern regiment during the battle in the fighting here in the morning and afternoon action. And the fight that the Iron Brigade put up here no doubt led to the Union victory at Gettysburg.
Good. So, Tim, a couple of things here. So, this is confusing stuff. Like,
It
you know,
is.
the Iron Brigade fights here in the morning action. They're fighting in a different configuration in the afternoon
right.
action. We're not going to try to fix, or as Doug Dowds would say, unfarkle all of this stuff right now. But we are going to pause up here after this car passes. We'll cross the road and reorient you a little bit. But suffice to say that the Iron Brigade is here for the initial action, pushing against Tennessee and Alabama troops along Willoughby's Run behind the camera. That fight sort of later calms down, and then later more Confederates show up. North Carolinians, Pettigrew's brigade, additional Confederate brigades, and Pettigrew's brigade, the largest Confederate brigade on the field, is going to fight against the Iron Brigade. And I would suggest that's when most of these casualties are happening, right?
Yes, you know, in the morning action, the 2nd Wisconsin lost 116 men killed or wounded or captured. And it was the highest loss of a you know, the units in the morning action of the first day. But in the afternoon action, when Pettigrew's brigade attacked, the fighting was intense. And I think we, as, you know, military historians sometimes try to imagine what it must have been like, or try to understand why units stand and fight instead of retreating off the field. But here in these woods on the afternoon of July 1st, the Iron Brigade and part of Pettigrew's brigade actually just stood toe to toe and fired into each other. And as it would turn out, the 24th Michigan lost more men than any other Northern regiment in the battle. And the 26th North Carolina would lose more men than any regiment in the battle. But of course they were in Pickett's charge also. Now, the 2nd highest loss for a unit in the Northern Army during the battle was the 151st Pennsylvania, which actually came in after the Iron Brigade went out and fought against the 26th North Carolina. And the 2nd highest loss for a Southern unit during the entire battle was the unit beside the 26th North Carolina, the 11th North Carolina, that also fought right here in the first day's action. So I don't know what that says about the fighting that occurred here, but I've always considered this stretch of woods in front of us as the bloodiest single spot on the entire battlefield.
Wow, because I've heard Tim say it a slightly different way about Rose Woods. We'll have to really get into that a little bit later. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. We're on the Gettysburg Battlefield here for 161. Tim and Chris are going to walk behind me and switch their microphones now. Check us out. Look how official we are. We got Sarah Byerly now behind the camera, and I think Chris has some things to say. Just note, we're going to hear from some other guests in a sec, and we are walking along the Iron Brigade line, Willoughby's Run. Yes, it's possessive. Would be down the hill past the woods behind me. Chris, what do you have, man?
Just real fast, you know, Tim really set me up for what I wanted to come on and speak about, and I think it is about the ferocity of the fighting here. And something to take into consideration are the units who are entering this battle who are brand new to the war. Now, the 24th Michigan has been at the Battle of Fredericksburg. They were at the Battle of Chancellorsville, but they really don't see much action. The Pettigrew's Brigade, they had seen action on the Peninsula Campaign, and then many of these guys will be coming up from North Carolina. Joe Davis's Mississippi Brigade of mixed Mississippians and North Carolinians, they're going to see a lot of action throughout most of this war. The 151st Pennsylvania, this is their first major action. It's a 9-month regiment. So what I'm getting at up here is the fact that many of these units, this is the first time they're coming into battle. And they're going to stand toe-to-toe with sometimes other greenhorns, sometimes veterans. And take into consideration, number one, the size of these units that will be engaged. Some of them are bringing in more than 400 men, which is well above the regimental average for the Union here at Gettysburg. And as they're fighting, that means there are more targets out there for these veteran soldiers. But think about these men who are newbies to battle. They don't know any better than to stand and fight. They don't want to retreat. They want to prove themselves to the veterans on either flank. And they definitely are not experiencing the combat exhaustion that some of these other veteran units will incur and endure as the years go on as they're off to war. So as we're looking at these battles, especially here on the first day, the Union First Corps had not seen much action since Antietam. One division that is here at Gettysburg was heavily engaged at Fredericksburg. Another one of its divisions was transferred to the 5th Corps. So we're switching around some of those men. So they haven't seen a lot of action. So we have a large Union Corps coming on here versus a large Confederate division, which is almost the size of a Union Corps, commanded by Henry Heth. So as you're thinking about these men coming into action, we have newbies versus veterans. And not always do these newbies know that they should maybe fall back, find a better position, though McPherson's Woods is a pretty good position for the Iron Brigade, but it's going to show the tenacity out here as 14 color bearers fall with the 26th North Carolina, including their youngest colonel, Henry King Burgoyne Jr. Over on the other side, the Michiganders will lose something like 9 color bearers. And the ferocity of the fighting down here will just play out over and over. To the north of here, we'll have the 147th York, who see their first action and get cut off across the railroad cut by some Mississippians and North Carolinians. They too don't know that they should be pulling back. And there's some mistaken orders on that part of the field. But as we look at the Battle of Gettysburg, we're in July of 1863. And as we're in July of 1863, not all of these units are veteran soldiers. Many of them fighting here on the first day are new to battle, even though they've been into the Army for sometimes months or years.
Good. Thanks, Chris. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. We're still on the first day. Before we go over and see our guests, I want to point out something that hardly anyone gets to see. People walk right by this little entrance here. You see it's blocked by a bush now, but it's a walking trail. This will take you down to Willoughby's Run. We're not going to go down there, but we're going to encourage you to do it. Explore the battlefield on foot. It's about 120 yards or so, and you can overlook the banks of Willoughby's Run. These woods would have been much thinner during the Civil War, considerably so, grazed by livestock. There'd be no undergrowth, and farmers would cut up actually their timber and actually use it. Now, we're going to go back to our friends again from the National Civil War Museum. Let me get ahead and hand them a mic because they have another thing for this unit right here.
Yeah, so we have a 1863 pocket diary that belonged to Daniel Custer. And Custer was a resident of Galion, Wisconsin. He enlisted in July 28, 1861 as a musician in the regiment. He was captured in Gainesville, Virginia in August of 1862. And he would become a principal musician in the unit in April of 1864. So I'll read briefly read the segment related to the fighting here at Gettysburg. And that piece on the march to Pennsylvania, he explains some of the weather, the drawing of rations, but on July 1st, 1863, he says it was warm and cloudy with showers. Revelry was at 5 o'clock on the 6 a.m., so likely around 5:30. Arrived at Gettysburg at 10 a.m., marched a distance of 5 miles, and immediately went into the fight and dropped the enemy, but was compelled by superior force to fall back in the evening with heavy loss. The 7th. The 7th would lose 199 in killed, wounded, and missing. The brigade near 1,100 men. So it's a good tidbit of content there that informs us of the casualties. Of course, you have officers writing in their reports more of a detailed record of the casualties, more accurate record, but for a private soldier to say that tells something about how people are observing what's going on.
I can't thank you enough for bringing that out, Dane, because I'll tell you what, that's an intensely personal object to Custer. I don't know of anything more personal than somebody's diary. If my house were on fire and everything living were out, it's the first thing I'd grab. I'd leave everything else behind, as long as everything alive was already out, before I left my journals behind. So to have something like that from somebody who was actually here, a first-hand participant writing in real time about what happened. And in a diary, I think people are more frank than in any other format. So I think it's great that our friends brought that out there. Now, Chris, we are walking along part of McPherson Ridge in these terribly bloody woods here. You're looking at the 2nd Wisconsin Monument, terrible casualties with them. These regiments flip-flopped between the initial actions and the later actions, and then we're going to work our way up a little bit further. And I see Sarah here sneaking up here with a mic. You got something to say?
Well, Gary, we're just passing the Iron Brigade Monument, which you may have also spotted in the back of Chris's video. And Gary, we might have some folks watching who aren't familiar. How did this brigade get their nickname?
Good. So first of all, I'll say that those monuments, you notice that they're tinged red there. That's because they're from red Wisconsin granite, which is pretty cool. They're really interesting monuments. So these guys, got their name beforehand. Namely, they fought at 2nd Manassas, Groveton, Bronner's Farm in a stand-up fight. And then they're going to end up at the Battle of South Mountain. And it was said that these men, these rugged Westerners from the far west, from the wilderness, that's how it was seen back then. These men from, Wisconsin and Indiana were made of iron. And they got that name early on and it stuck. And I'll bet you they didn't mind either. What do you think, Sarah?
I think that's right. And they're going to put up a fierce fight coming into these woods here.
Good. So here we are looking at the woods. Now let's pause for a quick sec because we're going to wrap it up shortly. There's so much to see right around here as we walk up to the monument of the 24th Michigan. Again, the most casualties suffered of any Union regiment here at Gettysburg, and they're part of the Iron Brigade. Now, as a battlefield guide, I'm sure Tim does the same thing. You drive through here and there's so much to orient people with. I see a brigade plaque right on the other side of that silver car there, neither of which was here during the battle. A brigade consists of 2 or more regiments, usually 4 regiments at the Battle of Gettysburg. So that's Archer's Brigade, the guys fighting against the Union's Iron Brigade, who has a plaque behind the camera there. Those brigades fit into divisions, those divisions fit into corps, and this is a great opportunity to talk about it. Also, to show one of the few Confederate regimental monuments on the battlefield. The Southerners monumented this battlefield differently, putting large state memorials in the 20th century over on Confederate Avenue. And I'm seeing off in the distance the 26th North Carolina regimental monument. The South was much more concerned with monumenting battlefields in the South where they won. So they didn't come up here right away. There was some opposition in putting up Confederate monuments in the North, even way back in the 1880s and 1890s. But this one was put up in, I believe, in the 1980s, mid-1980s. 1986, Chris is helping me there, and so before the 125th anniversary, so we actually have these 2 units that fought so savagely still facing each other with their memorials today. Now, one last thing I want to point out, and then I'll open it up and see if anybody else has anything, is another great trail that hardly anybody takes, and we'll probably just take it out on this trail here. I'll go behind Chris here. This is a trail, now we got people coming, that connects us with Reynolds' death site. So on the other side of Reynolds Woods, and just walk the battlefield. And even on an anniversary, you can be practically alone in the woods where these men from Michigan, Wisconsin, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, all struggled in this terrible death knell as the battle continued through them. So take the battlefield trails, get out to the field. We hope that this video inspires you a little bit to come out to the battlefield and check it out. Let's have Chris a moment of zen as we take this out. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for putting up with our connectivity issues. Thanks to the National Civil War Museum, to Carol, to Tim, to Sarah, and to Chris White for dealing with a lot of this stuff. Thank you all for watching and for supporting battlefield preservation and education.